So this is going to be covering the box models. It has different parts, being the border, the padding, the margin, and the width and the height of the element, so the dimensions of the element for the content. And as we can see in the right-hand side within the browser, they do have a computed representation of the box model, as well as the visual within the web page at the top. We're going to be making adjustments to the padding, the border, the margin, and the content dimensions. So lesson we're going to be focusing on the box model. So the box model is a term that's used when we're talking about the design and the layout of the page elements. So every single element on the page will have a representation of the content, so the height and the width of the content, the padding of that content. There's a border that's going to wrap around it, and then the margin is going to be outside. And that's going to represent all of those different parts that are going to be contained within the box model. If you are using a Chrome browser, you can select an element, do an inspect, and then within the inspect, if you scroll down to where we've got the styles and the computed styles, it will give you a representation of that particular element's box model. So we've got the margin, the border, the padding, and the default width and the height. So there are additional margins that are added because of the block content. So let's take a look and we'll make some adjustments. So first off, we'll select the page element that we want to apply the styling to, and that's going to be the element with an ID of 2, and we'll set a border so that we can see the boundaries with the inner content, and the border can be set using the border width. There's also a border color that we need to set, and then the border style property, and this can also be done as 1. So I'll show you the shorthand for this afterwards. So that allows us to apply the border around the page element, and now within the box model we've got a border of 1. I'll make this slightly smaller, so we do have it zoomed in fairly big. So I'll make it smaller so it's easier to see it within the screen, and then that way we can also see the box model that's associated with it. So there is a way to write this as shorthand. So I'm going to / and comment out this, and you can just do it as border. So most commonly you will see it written as border, because without all of these you're not going to see anything for the border. So set the width of the border and set the style of the border and the color of the border. So that's going to allow us to apply that. We can update these values. So if we do a 5 pix for the border, that's also going to update within the box model. And we notice that within the element itself, within the border, the padding is contained there. So let's add some padding to that page element. And you can set the padding just as we saw before, where we can do a padding top and set a number of units that we want to do the padding. You can also do padding bottom, and that's applying the different paddings to it. There's also the padding left and right. So set the padding left, set it to 15 pix, and set the padding right. So that's applied the padding. The padding is on the inside of the border and outside of the content area. For the content itself, let's set a width of 200 pix, and we'll set a height of 200 pix. So that will change the dimensions of the main container, and I'm actually going to set this to be 100 so that we can still see it visibly on the page. So now that has updated, whereas when it was just the default styling for the element, that was taking the properties of the div. So as we resized it, it was taking the entire width across of the available width of cross. So now we've got a set height and width. So just as we saw with the border, we can set the border the padding properties within the shorthand format, and that's going to be all done within the one line. So when we're setting the padding, the first set of padding, so if we set a padding of 5 pix, that's going to apply 5 pix all the way around. So we see that it gets applied to the top, the bottom, and the right and the left. If we can set another value there, this is going to be setting the top and the bottom is going to remain at 5, and the left and the right are going to be getting 10 pix. So if you have 2 values within the shorthand for the padding, it's going to apply it to top and bottom first, and then right and left next. If you add in 3 values within the padding, it's going to use a clockwise type format where the first value is applied to the top, the second value is going to be applied to the right, the third value is applied to the bottom, and because there's no fourth value yet, then it's going to be applying the left and the right position. So that's going to be applying the left and the right padding the same. So it's going to be 10 padding for both of those. And then lastly, we can add in a fourth value there, and that's going to allow us to apply padding to the top, the right, the bottom, and then the left side. And you can see that being represented here and rendered within the box model. Let's also look at what we can do with the margin. So just as we saw with the margin, margin top, bottom value, those are going to be added into the box model. They take place within the page, and we also have a shorthand method that we can use on those. Let's set a background color for the element. So setting a background color, and I'll set it as red. So this way we can see where the boundaries are of the page element. And notice that the red color is can be contained within the padding as well, and everything up until the border. But then outside of the border, if we're using the margin, that's not going to be added to the element. So that red color is not going to be added to that element. So setting up the margin, and just as we saw with the padding, and we'll start with the 20 pixels. So that's going to add a margin for the top, bottom, and all the way around. If we do 10 pixels as the next value, that's going to be for the left and the right values. So just as we saw with padding, the margins are going to work the same way. And then I'll add in the other two options. And now we've got separate padding and separate margins for all of the sides of the page element. Typically we do use the shorthand methods for the padding, for the border, and for the margin in order to apply the styling to these page elements. So go ahead and try it out, make a selection of a page element and apply updating the box model property values to that element. And you can be ready to move on to the next lesson.